Alright, this is Deuteronomy 26 in the Prager Rational Bible. Let's begin. This is the final chapter of the laws, beginning with Deuteronomy 12. They concern rituals to be performed by the Israelites once they enter the land of Israel. Alright, verse 1. When you enter the land that the Lord your God is giving you as a heritage, and you possess it and settle in it, you shall... verse 2, you shall take some of every first fruit of the soil which you harvest from the land that the Lord your God is giving you, put it in a basket, and go to the place where the Lord your God will choose to establish his name. So the Feast of Weeks, Savaot. Moses spoke of the place where God's name will reside, not where God will reside. The universal God of the Torah, the God who created the universe, is outside of it, and he resides everywhere. He chose to establish his name in one earthly location, the tabernacle, and then later the temple. He instructed his chosen people to build in Jerusalem. Alright, verse 3. You shall go to the priest in charge at that time and say to him, I acknowledge this day before the Lord your God that I have entered the land that the Lord swore to our fathers to assign us. So verse 3, the Hebrew language distinguishes between the singular and plural forms of you. The entire chapter, this entire chapter is in the singular, meaning it's directed at every individual. The farmer therefore declares, I have entered the land that the Lord swore to our fathers, speaking in the first person. And the farmer identifies himself with the first generation of Israelites who, that entered the land. And this is echoed in the Passover liturgy. Each participant is instructed to see himself as if he personally left Egypt. In Jews, speaking in terms of I or we is one of the reasons for the Jews' survival across millennia. Their history is incorporated into their own lives. And Jews do not say they went out of Egypt, but we went out of Egypt. We received the Ten Commandments, or as in this case, I have entered the land that the Lord swore to our fathers. Alright, verse 4. The priest shall take the basket from your hand and set it down in front of the altar of the Lord your God. 5. You shall then recite as follows before the Lord your God. My father was a fugitive Aramean, and he went down to Egypt with meager numbers and sojourned there. But he became a great and very populous nation. Now, the fugitive, often referred to as wandering Aramean, is generally understood to be Jacob, since his mother was Aramean, Rebekah, and he himself spent at least 20 years in Aram when he worked for his uncle Laban. Tige makes the important point that this formula for the first time shifted the focus of religious ceremony from the role of God in nature to the role of God in history. Until the Torah, nearly all gods, false gods, were gods of nature. The God of the Torah is the God of history. This is one reason belief in the Exodus, along with the belief in creation, is central to Judaism and even Christianity, because Christianity believes in these things too. And ultimately pointing to Jesus, who created everything, and he's the one who delivers us out of the slavery of sin. And without the Exodus, Judaism loses one of its two core beliefs. And Jews who maintain the Exodus is a wonderful story that never actually occurred are unintentionally ensuring that Judaism will not long endure. Yeah, well, Judaism needs to ultimately come to the Savior Jesus. So, I mean, that's the big problem with Judaism. They don't believe that Jesus is the Messiah, and they still believe you have to work your way to heaven, and no one is justified by the law. Alright, but anyway, I like learning about this. I mean, this is a good, perspective. And we can't really understand the New Testament without the Old Testament. Rituals are at the heart of Jewish practice, identity, and continuity. And for this reason, it is unlikely that Jews who do not attend a Passover Seder or go to synagogue on Yom Kippur will have Jewish grandchildren. And at the same time, when rituals lose their meaning and become mere habits, that too can lead to many young people abandoning the religion. And this is precisely what occurred when Jews were free to leave Orthodoxy, and vast numbers rejected Judaism because they found Jewish rituals meaningless. In effect, Jews without Jewish rituals and Jewish rituals without meaning have led to the same thing: Jews without Judaism. Yeah. But ultimately, I would say they would need to flee from these traditions and rules and not keep trying to keep the law. They need to flee to Christ, because this stuff is not going to save you. Yep. Perspective versus spontaneous prayer. Not perspective, prescriptive. Well, that whole section was called the Feast of Weeks. So, Savaot, that's what it was called. So now this section, prescriptive versus spontaneous prayer. You shall then recite as follows before the Lord your God. Alright, before I get there, here's what Prager says. The Torah does not leave this prayer to the discretion of the individual. Indeed, the worshiper is provided with specific words to recite. And this is true of Jewish prayer in general. It is prescriptive, instructing Jews about what is most important to say to and about God on a regular basis, and reminding them of what they should value in life. And another reason for prescribed prayer is that most Jewish prayer is meant to be said with other Jews, which is possible only if everyone is reciting the same prayer, in addition to whatever one wishes to pray spontaneously and silently. And both communal and spontaneous prayer are important. And over the course of decades of interactions with Christians, I have observed the power of spontaneous prayer, not only on Christians, but on myself. Well, prayer is not really spontaneous because the Spirit helps Christians to say what is needed to say. Well, anyway, Prager observed the power of spontaneous prayer not only on Christians but also upon himself. At meals with Christians, I have often been asked to open with a prayer, and I have found myself moved by my own prayer. And there are advantages and disadvantages to both types of prayer. Advantages of the Jewish approach include preserving a connection with the past. And Jews today recite the same prayers their ancestors recited for thousands of years. And Jews recite this in the essence of the faith on a daily basis. And the prayers unite Jews. The prayers unite Jews the world over. And when Jews from America or Russia attend a service in Argentina or Morocco, they are attending the same service they attend at home. And the disadvantage is that such prayer can become rote. When one says the same prayers 3 times a day, every day, all of one's life, it's a challenge to keep them meaningful, no matter how beautiful or profound they are. Shakespeare's plays are often the most profound works of literature ever written. But if one has to read the same one or two Shakespeare plays every day, they could lose their ability to inspire. And the disadvantage of spontaneous prayer is that its very spontaneity keeps it alive and real. The advantage. It is the person talking to God in his own language. Well, through the working of the Spirit. But spontaneous prayer lacks at least two of the advantages of prescriptive prayer. One is that a Christian from America who was attending a Christian service in Morocco or Russia, to use two Jewish examples, will feel lost. And another is the pedagogic function, and another is that the pedagogic function of prescribed prayer is lost. For example, since so much of Jewish prayer consists of biblical citations, Jews learn and commit to memory parts of the Bible from their prayers. And the ideal is a combination of both. Having witnessed the power of spontaneous prayer, I think more spontaneous prayer, such as at the beginning of a meal or at a public event, would add immeasurably to the quality of Jews' religious lives, and Christians would add intellectual and religious depth to the prayers by reciting the fundamentals of their faith and biblical verses on a regular basis. Yeah, and we should do that. I mean, really, we should pray the scriptures to God, and Jesus tells us how to pray. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us of our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Now, we may not say it exactly like that, but the way we pray, should be similar to that. Have a similar design. Where we ask the Lord for His will to be done, whatever we're praying for, our needs or desire, and also to pray, to forgive us of our sins and to help us forgive others and to lead us away from evil and to fight against the sins that we still struggle with, and of course give Him the honor and the glory due. There you go. That's how you can do it. Yeah, and sneak scriptures in there if you can. Yeah. Alright, well, pray that, what He would want from you in the scriptures. Ask Him to, bring those things about, if it's your will. Such as, help me to become more holy as you want me to be holy. That would be a good example. Alright, moving on. Verse 6, the Egyptians dealt harshly with us and oppressed us. They imposed heavy labor upon us. We cried to the Lord, verse 7, we cried to the Lord, the God of our fathers, and the Lord heard our plea and saw our plight, our misery and our oppression. 8, the Lord freed us from Egypt by a mighty hand, by an outstretched arm and awesome power, and by signs and portions. 9, He brought us to this place and gave us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. 10, wherefore I now bring the first fruits of the soil which you, O Lord, have given me. You shall leave it before the Lord your God, and bow low before the Lord your God. Alright, essay. Happiness is a moral obligation. 11, and you shall enjoy, together with the Levite and the stranger in your midst, all the bounty that the Lord your God has bestowed upon you and your household. So verse 11 commands the Israelite, as translated here, to enjoy God's bounty. Literally translated, the Hebrew, I don't know if I'm going to say this right, Vivshamakta, however you say that, commands the Israelite to be happy. Repeatedly, the Torah commands the Israelite to rejoice, enjoy, and to be happy. Given how much pain the vast majority of people endure, this commandment is quite remarkable. The Torah renders happiness a moral and religious obligation. Yeah, we are to rejoice in the Lord. We may not always feel happy, but we are still supposed to rejoice in the Lord and consider it pure joy when you face trials. That's at the beginning of James. Even if you may not always feel happy, but you can still take joy within them. But anyway, first we owe it to all those who come into our lives to have a happy disposition. This point should be self-evident. Even unhappy people prefer to associate with happy people. No one wants to live with, work with, or be raised by, or befriend or parent an unhappy person. Or a Debbie Downer, as that person can be called. Alright. Ask a child what it was like to grow up with an unhappy parent, or ask parents what pain they suffer if they have an unhappy child of any age, and the case for happiness as a moral obligation becomes abundantly clear. And I wrote about happiness as a moral obligation in my book on happiness. He's got a book on happiness. What was it called again? Let me look at the footnotes at the back of the book. Let me see what it was called. Go to 26 footnote back notes. Here it is. Happiness is a serious problem. This came out in 1998. Alright, got it. And of course, on his radio show, he has a happiness hour every week. I'm talking about this. So, anyway. Alright, now it was the Torah and Judaism that made me aware of this point, which a great many people have told me changed their lives for the better. People think of happiness as an emotional state, not a behavioral practice, and certainly not as a moral obligation. But it is, just as we owe it to others to clean our bodies and mouths so as not to inflict bad odors on others, we owe it to others not to inflict bad moods on them. Second, the happy make a better world, and the unhappy make the world worse. Happy people not only contribute positively to their family life and their local communities and their workplace, but they also make the world better by not seeking to destroy essentially decent societies. And the unhappy, on the other hand, often seek to destroy their societies. Like our society. The people that have the power in our society, the left, they are very unhappy people. And usually unhappy people want to make other people unhappy as well. And the primary reason is that they attribute their unhappiness to the society, not to their own attitudes and choices. They think of themselves as victims. You see all this victim mentality going around, that blacks are being persecuted by the police. White supremacy is the big issue in this country. It's always somebody else's fault. It's never my fault. All of these excuses not to take personal responsibility. But what if it's really your fault? What if you're in the shape you're in because of the choices that you made? What if you keep running into the police because of the choices that you make? What about that? And the tragedies that... But the primary reason that, unhappy people want to destroy societies is because they pretty much think that they're unhappy because of their society, as I read. Yep. Yep. And not to mention their own attitudes and choices and the tragedies that periodically darken people's lives, or their own inability or unwillingness to improve their lot in life. So they always blame, the society. They never blame themselves, or a tragedy that could happen, or just their unwillingness to change. Well, people by nature don't want to change. That's the thing. And that's why people need a savior. So, in addition, people act more decently whenever they're happy. When people are happy, they are far more positively positively disposed towards other people, and they treat other people better when they are they treat other people better than when they are unhappy. And third, unhappy religious people reflect poorly on God and religion. As I wrote in my book on happiness, here's what he said. I once asked a deeply religious man if he considered himself a truly pious person. He responded that while he aspired to be one, he fell short in 2 areas. Probably more than that. One of these areas, he said, was not being a happy enough person to be considered truly pious. His point was that unhappy religious people reflect poorly on their religion and on their Creator. And he was right. In fact, unhappy religious people pose a real challenge to the faith. If their faith is so impressive, why are these devoted adherents why aren't these devoted adherents happy? There are only 2 possible reasons. Either they're not practicing their faith correctly, or they're practicing their faith correctly, and the religion itself is not conducive to happiness. And most outsiders assume the latter reason. Unhappy religious people should therefore think about how important being happy is, if not for themselves, then for the sake of their religion. Unhappy, let alone angry religious people provide more persuasive arguments for atheism and secularism than do arguments of atheists. Well, ultimately, people get turned off by religion because of hypocrisy. That's probably not primarily because you have unhappy people, but probably because of hypocrisy. Yep, and you can have happy religious people, when I'm saying that, who can claim to be Christians, but yet they live a life full of sin and they're okay with it. They're happy with their sin. That's the happiness that you should not have. You should not be happy with your sin. You should hate your sin. So, if you're happy in that regard, then that type of happiness would be sinful. Happy with your sin, then not good. And you are in danger of hell if you don't repent. All that I have written should of course be understood as applying to those who, in a sense, as applying only to those who, in a sense, have chosen to be unhappy. It does not apply to those whose unhappiness derives from chemical imbalances, for which they should, of course, seek treatment, or to those who are undergoing personal tragedies. Well, the ultimate thing I would say that can, deal with, probably one of the reasons why, you might, you do have chemical imbalances, and some people can get depressed more easily than others. But probably another reason, why you have, people that can end up feeling unhappy is because because the lies that the devil feeds them in order to keep them in bondage and to never find freedom in Christ. He has such lies that can lead to depression and suicide. And then, of course, whenever you go through a tragedy, the lie that God is gone and he doesn't care, and why did he allow that to happen to you? And that can cause you to become unhappy and even embittered and angry towards God and turn away from God if you buy into it. So, which is why in the midst of a tragedy, you need to cling to God. Like with Jeremiah, he witnessed the tragedy of the fall of Jerusalem and wrote the book of Lamentations, lamenting over that tragedy happening. But yet, even in the midst of that, in chapter 3, he said, "Great is thy faithfulness." That even in the midst of whatever tragedy you have, you still choose to trust in God, and you still say that, yes, I don't know why, it's a horrible thing that this happened, but I still believe you're here, you're still on the throne, you know what you're doing. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Yeah. But the devil doesn't want you to hold to these truths, and he tries to undermine these truths. And that's why you can probably get some of these other instances of being unhappy and depressed and embittered and angry. Because he doesn't want you to, because the devil doesn't want you to experience the joy of the Lord. He doesn't. He doesn't want you to experience the joy of knowing Christ and being free from your sin. At all. And if unhappiness is the way that he can prevent you from experiencing that, then he's going to do it. And that's probably a big way that he does it. Feeding you lies that can make you feel that. That can make you feel that way when you let him. Alright, moving on. But I just wanted to make that clear. In verses 1 through 11, the word God appears 14 times, and a variant of the word give appears 7 times. And throughout the Torah, the number 7 and its multiples is the most significant number, as it harkens back to God's creating the world in 7 days. Well, created it 6 days and then rested on the 7th day. Not because he was tired, but because his work was complete. And to marvel at the good work that he made. And then, of course, ushering in the plan of redemption that you see throughout the Bible by sending his son. And the inclusion of the stranger and the non-Israelite dwelling in Israel in this verse raises an obvious question. How can a non-Israelite recite all the words of the prayer in verses 5 through 10, given that they speak of how the Egyptians dealt harshly with us and how the Lord freed us from Egypt? Now, the non-Israelite cannot honestly say those words. His ancestors were not Aramean, and they were not freed from Egypt, etc. For this reason, the rabbis ruled that while the stranger is to take part in the ceremony, he is exempt from reciting this prayer. And there's a citation of this ruling, so let me go back to the back notes here, the end. This ruling was in Mishnah Bikurim 1:4. I don't know. I'm not well familiar with the Judaism, so anyway. But this rabbinic ruling makes complete sense, but since the Torah does not seem to make, but the Torah text does not seem to make that distinction. Yeah, therefore, it is quite possible that the original intent of the Torah might well have been that the stranger dwelling in Israel should recite these words, even though they're not literally true in his case. Well, maybe this non-Israelite who would become a convert maybe would ultimately recite the words. I don't know. It may have been the Torah's way of further incorporating the stranger into the Israelite people. Yeah. And becoming part of the congregation and coming to faith in the true God. And then you could, I think, maybe honestly recite those words. Yeah, even though you never technically came out of Egypt, but you would. Yeah, well, even these ancestors, well, even the Israelites who would come long after the generation of the Israelites who came out of Egypt, I mean, they technically never actually came out of Egypt, but they identify with that. And I guess the non-Israelite could too, since they come to faith in the true God, probably. I don't know. I'm just guessing. Alright, tithing. Verse 12. When you have set aside in full the 10th part of your yield in the 3rd year, the year of the tithe, and have given it to the Levite, the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, that they may eat their fill in your settlements. Alright, we'll continue after this little note. In verse 12. The Torah mandates a 10% flat tax on all Israelites regardless of their economic status. Everyone must set aside 1/10 of their produce or earnings for the poor during the 3rd and 6th year of each 7-year cycle. And then, of course, the 7th year, all the debts would be forgiven. 13. You shall declare before the Lord your God, I have cleared out the consecrated portion from the house, and I have given it to the Levite, the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, just as you commanded me. I have neither transgressed nor neglected any of your commandments. Since no one can honestly say that he did not violate a single commandment, affirming that there is no person who has never sinned. Yeah. Let me read that again. Since no one can honestly say that he did not violate a single commandment, affirming that there is no person who has never sinned. True, everybody has sinned. No one does good, not even one. This verse does not refer to all the commandments, but it refers to the commandments on tithing, that the person did not neglect or transgress against these tithing commandments. And you shall declare before the Lord your God, 14, I have not eaten of it while in mourning. I have not cleared out any of it while I was unclean, and I have not deposited any of it with the dead. I have obeyed the Lord my God. I have done just as you commanded me. The Israelite was to make 3 declarations that the food was not used in any death-related situation. First, he has not eaten the food while in mourning. Second, he has not touched the food while in an impure, i.e. death-related state. Third, he has not replicated pagan rituals in which food is donated to the dead. And this refers to placing food at a relative's grave or to offerings presented to Baal, Moloch, or Mot, the dead one. And these affirmations reminded the Israelites that one obeys God by celebrating life, not death, and that tithes are meant for the needy living, not the dead who have no need for food or anything else. God's not the God of the dead, but the living. So, moving on, 15. And therefore, you should not celebrate, death. Alright, 15. Look down from your holy abode from heaven and bless your people Israel in the soil you have given us, a land flowing with milk and honey, as you swore to our fathers. The farmer did not pray for his own prosperity alone, but for the entire people. And to this day, virtually every prayer in the Jewish prayer book is in the plural. 16. The Lord your God commands you this day to observe these laws and rules. Observe them faithfully with all your heart and soul. 17. You have affirmed this day that the Lord is your God, that you will walk in all of his ways, so that you will observe his laws and commandments and rules, and that you will obey him. 18. And the Lord has affirmed this day that you are, as he promised you, his treasured people who shall observe all of his commandments. Now, before Jews were chosen by God, they had no distinguishing characteristics. It is by virtue of the Torah, its laws and teachings, and being chosen to make God's existence and morality known, that the Jews became a distinctive people. As regards the logic of God's choosing a specific people for this specific task, an insightful explanation was offered by Harold Kushner. We learn to dive, to swim, we learn to drive and dive if you want to learn how to swim. To swim, to throw a football, or to play the piano, not by reading a book about how to do it, but by watching people do it correctly and trying to imitate them. The Jews were chosen to be a pilot project, a demonstration community, and God would give them explicit instructions about how to carry out the God-centered life. If they did it, they would bring other peoples of the world to see how satisfying it is to live that way. And ultimately, God chose the Jews because it was through them that the Messiah would come and save. And 19, and that he will set you in a frame and renown and glory, high above all the nations that he has made, that you shall be, as he promised, a holy people to the Lord your God. So Jews are not inherently superior to any other people, but God's teachings and commandments are. Yes, only by observing them will Jews be high above all the nations. We'll see the commentary to Deuteronomy 28, verse 1, Lord willing. And Moses summarized the laws of the Deuteronomy chapters 12 through 26 by noting the ultimate purpose of all these laws, to be a holy people to the Lord your God. And even in the New Testament, you've been forgiven by Christ, you have been crucified with Christ, you have been buried with Christ, you have been raised with Christ. Therefore be imitators of Christ. Walk as he walked, being obedient, walking in obedience to God, because you have been set free from your sin. And if you died to sin, how can you live in it any longer? Even though, of course, you're not going to be perfect, but you're going to have a growing in obedience, and you will bear fruit in keeping with repentance if you really are a Christian. So, Lord, help us to bear fruit and to follow your word and to do your will. And may God bless you all, and may the grace and peace of Christ be with you all. Amen. See you next time.